public hearings, appeals, presentations, recognitions, and awards. Presentation discussing and consideration, possible approval of the telephone survey for public opinion regarding curbside collection service. Lee Zerk. So Lee, you're going to read this to us?
Well, Lee Zerk, General Services Director, Chairman, Authority members. This is it. This is what we've been waiting for quite a while. The survey of a public opinion regarding our collection service and potential recycling. Just a recap, back in January is when all this started, when the authority approved a professional services agreement with GBB and Shepard Research to conduct this survey. The purpose of which is, for this project, is to understand the opinions of our refuse customers so as to serve as a guide for any possible changes in refuse service and recycling in the future. Now, when this all started, GBB and Shepard Research worked with the city manager, staff members, Keep Broken Arrow Beautiful, the Broken Arrow Seniors, the Met, and the Broken Arrow Chamber of Commerce in developing the questions for this survey. So we did include many members of the community in getting this put out here and try to make it a meaningful survey that will help us in the future. The survey ultimately was conducted during the week of May 9th through May 13th. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kate Vesquez from GBB and Bill from Shepard Research that's going to give you a presentation about the survey and be able to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Lee.
Here's the, thank you. Got that up there, and there's the clip.
Thank you, Lee. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for having us. I know you've all seen the project before, and I think Lee did a pretty good job of summarizing it there for the public. You know, staff and city and the council want to provide the services that give what people really need and also the best value for the effort. And there are a lot of ways to go about that. So this survey gave us a good idea of where people are and give us a starting idea for their attitudes and level of engagement for any future decision making. Really quickly, this is what I'm going to talk about in the slides, Bill and I, and you can see we'll introduce ourselves. We'll talk about how the survey was formed a little bit, the results everyone wants to hear, and the broader implications for that in solid waste management decision making. There's me. I work for Gershman, Brickner & Bratton. We're solid waste management consultants outside Washington. I have been mostly customer facing for my career. At GBB, I specialize in recycling, curbside, waste reduction, planning, and communications. And communications is an essential, critical part of a solid waste management program. You know, this is a thing I always say there in the blue, which is if you can have a great system, people have got to participate in it for it to work properly. Now I'm going to let Bill introduce himself, and then he's going to talk for a couple of slides about the nuts and bolts and the science behind the survey.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, thank you for having us. I'm Bill Shepard. I'm with Shepard Research. We're located in Oklahoma City. We're a full-service market research firm. We're one of only a few firms in the state that performs our own data collection, and I think that's a very critical component to the kind of work that we do. We are also SoonerPoll.com. We are the state's only independent, nonpartisan polling firm. We mainly work for the news media and interest groups and associations in the state. And so this particular work was conducted as SoonerPoll. It's a brand that a lot of people throughout the state know and understand. And so one of the reasons why we can increase participation in research such as this. Do we want to go to the?
Yeah, they're just right there.
Okay, very good. Okay, so about the survey, this was a dual frame of landline and cell phone. The sample was purchased from Survey Sampling International, SSI. They are a international firm that provides a probability sample, and of course that's what this was. Citizens in the city of Broken Arrow who receive trash services were selected at random, and we initiated those phone calls. The sample was 400, which puts us just under a 5% margin of error. So when you look at all of the numbers. You can put a interval of 5% basically on either side of those. We operate at a 95% confidence level. There was nearly 1 in 3 were interviewed over the phone, over a cell phone. And so that's a critical component in providing a dual frame of landline and cell phone, because as we know, the number of people with landlines has been dropping precipitously since about the year 2000. We can go to the next one, I guess. Yes, as Lee had mentioned earlier, we met with staff and stakeholders early in this process. The process was to come by an instrument whereby there was buy-in from all of the different players within the community. Let's see, and then of course I think I've already talked about some of those, but yes, we also collected demographical information, and of course the objectives here was to find out about how people culturally or their attitudes are towards the current trash recycling system that is used in the city of Broken Arrow, and the culture that they have built around that. This is not the first time that we have engaged in this kind of work, talking to people about their trash and recycling services in other cities, and so we like to learn more about the culture of why they do what they do, because whatever process the city puts into place, there's a culture that builds around that. I think I kind of talked about that. What is a scientific survey? A scientific survey is one that is done from a probability sampling, which means that a sample was pulled from those selected at random within the community at large, and that is what was done here. Also, it mentions the wording. The questions were written in such a way so that we could collect an unbiased opinion throughout all of the questions that we asked. And then, is this mine or is this?
I can take it from
Okay, very good.
Thank
There you go.
Thank you, Bill. So these couple of slides, the council did see the questions ahead of time, and thank you for promoting them after promoting the survey after that. I just want to gloss real quickly over how the questions were categorized. We had questions about what people do. We had some questions about what they think. And we had questions about recycling specifically. And then we got some initial impressions of some ideas that can be in different kinds of systems. These were some of the examples. I did want to clarify that so everyone knows that they weren't in-depth specific questions about actual possibilities, so not sort of a feedback on exact programs or plans, but more of what do you think about this, what if it was like that. So the survey results. I'm doing something wrong. There we go. So at the very highest level, in the most summary way, people are generally positive and happy about the bag voucher system for now. They see recycling as a valuable service and a modern amenity for a community to have, which is an asset. You're not going to have to explain it to anybody what it is necessarily. They see adding recycling as a service improvement and realize that there may be a cost associated with that. And then the openness or the attitude towards rolling carts I would describe as guarded. And I've heard some stories about your neighbors in another city with some experience with carts and maybe some things in the past. So that's certainly understandable. And of course, change is always a challenge for all of us. So as I said, attitudes towards the bags were positive, clearly. Something is not populating correctly. I apologize on the PowerPoint, but that first bar should be almost 48% for extremely satisfied. The bags are front and center in home life, and there's a ritual involved. People are very attached to them, and this is a critical point to acknowledge because it's going to be an important part of any kind of adjustments. I want to point out to you the third bullet there on the list where it says the most typical answer for set-outs was 3 to 5 bags on the first day and 2 to 4 on the second day. And thank you, Bill. And yes, 47.9% on the first bar. And because this is something we're going to talk about a little bit more, is the typical set out number of bags. So we also gained some insights on, in the absence of hard data, we gained some insight on painting a picture of what people are setting out at the curb. And again, in the absence of hard data, it seems to be not atypical, or maybe kind of a normal sort of suburban kind of set out. We see a pattern of, I'm really sorry that these are not coming out right. These bars show what people set out most commonly at the curb when they have items that won't fit in the bags. And the number 1 and number 2 answers are boxes and landscaping material. That's another good thing to know when you're thinking about options, because in a way, people in Broken Arrow are sort of already source separating 2 items that are really recyclable, cardboard and branches. So then we got some insight on the carts or outside storage, and less than half of people say that they're consolidating their material outside in advance of collection day. Long-term residents were more likely to be doing so. And regarding the carts, you can see from the bars, even though the numbers aren't there, that it's kind of all over the place. The most popular answer is extremely favorable, but the next most popular answer is extremely unfavorable. So this is an opportunity to seek some more information about what are people's concerns, what are their objections, but also what do they like about the idea. Maybe they used to live somewhere else and they had that. What are the favorabilities? Interestingly, renters were broadly open to the idea. 97% of people that rent were interested in it. The most unfavorable were people who identified themselves as retired or disabled. And that's not an unusual information point that we find because of their concerns about handling the cart physically. We did find as an attitude, people feel that not having curbside recycling is quote unquote behind the times. You can see that younger people and newer residents especially express this attitude, but also 40% of long-term residents. You can see the agrees definitely dominate the number of responses. And I wanted to share with you that in some research I found from 2012 and 2014, about 55% of Americans now have curbside access to recycling. Overall, over 90% of Americans have recycling access of some kind. That would include, right now, people in Broken Arrow because you have the Met. So what are people not thinking about instead of what they are thinking about? They did not identify the current collection system itself as behind the times. It's unclear because there wasn't really a follow-up question. Do they mean the bags? Do they mean the twice a week? But the perception is that part is not the problem. It's the absence of recycling, perhaps. They also did not make a connection between the possible economic ramifications of not having recycling. And, you know, I heard several items on your agenda here tonight about economic development, and it's clear that that's been an ongoing activity here just by visiting the city. When we had our stakeholder meeting, there was a gentleman there from the Chamber of Commerce who talked about, he gets inquiries about the city, and that's one of the information points to share. Younger people were more likely to make that connection, though. Also, people were not generally responsive to pay-as-you-throw. The chart that just popped up there is about if you make more trash, you should pay more for trash, and if you make less trash, you should pay less for trash. It is kind of spread out, but the strongest response was not so much. And younger and newer residents, like I said, connected more with economic development. The opposition to pay-as-you-throw was highest among those who rent and who gave the lower income responses. So that's maybe another area to explore if pay-as-you-throw is something the city wants to pursue. People are interested in recycling. 38% say that they take their recyclables somewhere, but sadly 48% say they don't recycle at all. Now, I wanted to note that among those people who say they don't recycle at all, we also had a category of folks who said they've never been to the Met. But the people who said they've never been to the Met got a follow-up question, why not? only a quarter of them said, because I just don't recycle. The others expressed concerns about information, convenience, access, amount to make the effort. So it's not necessarily that they don't like recycling, it's that the drop-off center perhaps is not working for them. People are very interested in recycling, as I said. You know, if you were provided curbside, how likely are you to make a greater effort? Very strong response. Also, how important is it that Broken Arrow should have a recycling plan? Which is a really interesting question, had a strong response also. It bears mentioning here that some researchers feel that it's generally accepted that people over-report, do you recycle? Yes. Because they perceive it as something, many people perceive it as something they ought to say that they do. And that's...
Social acceptance bias.
Yes. And some researchers put that at 10 to 20%. But let's say we take the 20%. This is still a very good positive response to the idea. So what are your solid waste decision-making ramifications? And all of this survey has got a lot of really good information for you in an evaluation process to show what the city needs to think about going forward for any decision-making. Public engagement, as I mentioned, is super important, and it is critical for culture change. Adding recycling is always a culture change, but it's a deeper thing here because of the system you currently have. If you add curbside recycling, are you also going to change the bag system? Are you going to change how frequently you collect trash? Are you going to have containers now? Are you going to change how you bill? It's a broader approach to this change than just kind of slapping on recycling. Any of these changes are going to need to be handled very carefully and address people's concerns head-on and proactively to address any perceived or real losses of service. Now, your status quo has a lot of strengths for the idea of adding recycling. If all those bags people put on their second day had recycling in them instead of trash, you would have a pretty decent recycling rate. This would be on par with the national average. Most households are setting out, and by my estimation, a typical amount of yard waste. One of the things we wondered in the initial meeting was, are people putting like a ton of yard waste in those bags? Do we have a yard waste problem? But when they answer these questions, they're saying they do about 64 gallons, and that is a typical service level that's offered by a lot of communities. A lot of the bulky items they're putting out are recyclable. That gives you an opportunity to think about doing bulky collection that's diverted from disposal. I understand you may have a change coming up on disposal, so it may be that that's coming anyway. People who live here express that they view recycling as a modern amenity. I think this is part of the evolution of recycling in our country, from a cause to a nice to have to a core service. People who've lived elsewhere there's a good chance they've had it there, and they're looking to have it here. And people acknowledge that with a service change, there may be some cost. The dollar amounts that they threw out, as I detail in the report, were not that off base either. Now, right now, as I look at this, I kind of regret the title of this slide because it implies people are challenges. But at the time, my thinking was you have challenges that are the human aspect, and then you have challenges that you'll see in the next slide that are the operational aspect. So I don't mean we've got challenging people. Please forgive me. But, you know, there are the parts that have to do with people. People said they recycle, but that might be getting over-reported. Metered pricing, which I know is something that the city has had a lot of interest in, it was a very lukewarm reception. And there may be a perception of a service decrease, whether or not there actually is when you make a change. That's very common. Some challenges to think about and look at when you're doing your program, how to make the money work. What are you going to do? Are you going to reallocate funds? Are you going to have carts, bags, frequency, all of the things I mentioned in the previous slides? How many changes can the system bear and the residents bear? Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and as mentioned, there's $500,000 being spent in purchasing bags, which the bags are thrown away. So there's $500,000 that's thrown away every year.
Literally.
Literally.
So, it's a big expenditure to think about maybe if any of it needs to get reallocated. This project scope was about the survey and the perspective on it, but we have prepared a couple of ideas for the next part of this project and evaluation. I think you have a lot of resources and opportunity here in Broken Arrow to add curbside recycling if that's what you want to go forward with. You have a lot of options available to you because you're sort of starting from scratch in a way. To pursue different options, and you already have a dedicated funding source for that activity. I can't overstate the importance of planning out both the whatever planning, procurement activities you might have, and also planning what exactly you're going to do for public involvement from the very get-go. I have public involvement on its own slide because that's how important it is. I would strongly suggest writing out a whole plan that's clear to everybody when they'll have an opportunity to speak, when they'll have an opportunity to participate. I usually like to recommend 3 to 5 things. One traditional meeting, a couple of workshops, something that is interactive, and then maybe at an event. It gives a wide opportunity, and then that's not even counting any online things. And you've got, as I mentioned throughout the presentation, you have some opportunities to seek additional feedback. I'm sorry, I skipped a slide. If you add recycling, you'll have some kind of procurement, whether it's for containers or a different kind of bag or what have you. Procurement is a well-written procurement is an excellent opportunity to also get information and costing. And then the last thing would be your implementation. Make sure that there are any kind of contract you might have that you make your vendor give you information so that you can use that to evaluate your program. That is the completion of my slides. I'm happy to take any questions, as is Bill.
Any questions from council? I thought one thing was interesting in the survey. I read that the people that currently recycle, the age groups, that most people that recycle, the largest group was 65 to 74, which I was surprised, and the smallest one was 18 to 24, which I thought would be on the high end. So that was very interesting from the survey.
Typically, that's a time constraint.
Right.
Where younger people are more working, they have quicker lifestyles. If you're more older, you have more time to spend with doing that or taking things or thinking that in advance.
We're not
Okay, well, no questions?
I don't have any question. I just concur. I felt like we've been behind for a long time when it comes to recycling. And my wife and I recycle. We take it to the Met. And when I go to other cities, it seems like every city has some type of recycling. And we've looked at this for so long. And I appreciate as we went through here that the citizens, I feel like, are ready for the recycling of some type, to get started. Kind of maybe as a stepping stone, to get somewhere, make it easier to pick up. And I think the survey was really great for the city to pick up and go from there as far as making decisions. But I was particularly excited about the recycling numbers and the number of citizens that want to be involved with recycling.
It was very positive, yes.
And curbside will give even you and others like you an easier opportunity to recycle. In fact, you'll probably end up recycling more because of the curbside ability.
Well, and our trash, and it's just my wife and I, but we with 60 to 65% less trash, just what little bit we do recycle, and we only use the one day that they pick up. We don't need to pick up the second day, and we've never done that after we started recycling.
I would like to note that, as Kate mentioned, that Broken Arrow citizens are very attached or dependent on the bag system, which does not lend itself necessarily to implementing any kind of recycling process. And as we found in the research, that there is a culture that's built up around that. If they have a kitchen trash can, there is a city bag in that trash can. If there is another trash can, it's in the garage. A lot of these cultures are built up, and so that when you begin to then try some different ideas of how to incorporate recycling, some of that culture will need to change, but then most people, while resistant to the change, we have seen in other cities that once they get used to it, they really like it. And so I would also point to that we just conducted a citizen satisfaction survey for the city of Tulsa, which, as you know, just went through a complete change of their trash and recycling system and found that people were overwhelmingly looked very favorably. Even though they had a lot of bumps on the way, as you're probably aware, people were overall very favorable towards the new system.
I think it's something that's important to do for the future. I know I've paid for curbside recycling for about 10 years and still have to take some things to the Met because they don't pick up everything. So I think that's important. Our challenge here is the fact that we've done such an excellent job with our trash service. It's one of those issues, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And so I think that's the big challenge, is we've done such a great job, but I do think that people want to recycle. I think it's important to people to recycle. And I've noticed also I have in composting and recycling, I have about a 60% or more reduction in trash that I put out. So it has made a big difference. So we have any more discussion, questions?
No, I was pleased to see that the majority of Broken Arrow ones appear to be ready to look at. I mean, we've known that for a long time with the fact that our Met location is the most used, bar none, than anywhere else in the whole area. But it's nice to see it on paper as well, that our citizens do view recycling as important. I think the hard part is how do we implement that, and how do we help them with that. But it appears that they're ready for that, so now we just have to figure out how to make it work.
Okay, and thank you so much, Kate and Bill, for presenting this and for doing this survey and study.
Thank you so much for having us. It was a very interesting project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Scott, that was a good segue into to Michael, who's going to give us some more information about the process.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the authority. Let me also extend my appreciation to Kate and to Bill for their efforts, and also for Lee Zirk and for Bill Kate for their stewardship of helping make this happen. I have two recommendations for you that I would like for you to consider tonight or sometime in the near future. The first one does relate to the collection of our trash, and I have a few talking points that I want to make sure the council members and authority members and the public understand. And then the second one is regarding recycling. I absolutely believe at this particular time we need to continue collecting our trash the way that we currently collect it. I think that's very important, the culture that we have, the expectations, and so I think that's something that needs to remain the way it is. And I know that's the number one concern that a lot of folks have, and I believe that we need to continue the way we're doing it. Now, we do have a great service, there's no question. We've been collecting trash the currently way we've been collecting it for probably close to, if not over 40 years. Twice a week, curbside service. The customers have become very accustomed to that collection style. The cost of the bags, everybody jokingly says our free bags, but those cost of those bags is about $500,000, and it's a part of the monthly charge that we collect from our citizens. It is incorporated. Broken Arrow's efforts for recycling, as it's talked tonight, has been limited to the Met. And the Met does a great job. We have a great partnership with them, and I think Councilman Udy is correct that we've demonstrated that people will recycle because it takes additional effort. Councilman Vice Mayor Carter talked about, and like others do, they gather their stuff up in Councilman Parks and they take it to the Met. And whatever we do, we need to continue to partner with the Met, because I think that there's still certainly a need for that services in our community. The staff, we have some challenges with the way we currently collect the trash. Staffing, it is a challenge. Commercial driver's license for sanitation trucks is mandated by the federal DOT. Although finding a driver is not a great challenge, there is a learning curve in becoming familiar with our routes. We have money council approved in the budget this year in the capital improvement to purchase route software, and we plan to implement that sometime during this fiscal year. I think that's very important. Secondly, is that one of the greatest challenges hiring refuse collectors that also have a license to drive a truck in an emergency or on-call situation. I believe we have 13 routes and we have 14 drivers, as I understand it. And our drivers are great employees, but they do have time off. And when they have time off, someone needs to step in and drive, and we've had a challenge, as I understanding, is find individuals that will work off the back of the truck and then step up and drive. And if in fact we don't have 13 drivers, I understand it, there are times when we have to double up on our routes, which actually extends the work that folks have to do to provide the great service that we do. We also have been limited in finding, as I mentioned, folks that have CDLs that wanted to work off the back of the truck. We have to supplement our department for the collection of trash with the temporary service. And that varies at times throughout the year of finding enough people to do the work. And we have great employees, but that we have to supplement because there would be no way that we could collect the trash with just our folks. And so these are several of the ongoing challenges that Lee Zirk and Mr. Cade have to deal with every day, but we still get it done. But sometimes it is a challenge. I think the route software is going to be a tremendous benefit to help us when we have to have folks step in and drive that don't normally drive their routes on a regular basis. So I bring those up because we're monitoring these, but they're ongoing. And it's just something that concerns me because if we have trouble getting personnel or drivers, it affects our ability to continue to provide a great service. So with that, that's the challenge. With regard to recycling, I absolutely agree with the results of the survey, and I would like to ask the council support for, first, is to approve the administration going forward and looking at options for implementing a curbside collection program for recycling within our community. I would like to do that with full transparency, as Kate and Bill talked about. That's my mantra, and I'd like to do that by creating an ad hoc citizens committee. And I would like to ask the council members, to each of you, to give me a name of an individual to serve on that committee, along with a couple of staff members that will help facilitate, like the Chamber of Commerce, probably the school district, but probably anywhere from 8 to 12 citizens of our community that would serve on a committee. I believe that we're going to need some professional or technical assistance to help us with this, even though I've done it a couple of times. There's budgeting that has to be put together. There are the latest and greatest ways of doing this. I certainly would like us to make sure that our citizens that are going to be looking at this have access to the best information so they can make the most informed decision. We would have a series of meetings of the committee, and that would include, and I'm going to invite the councils, we'd go look at the recycling center that we have in Tulsa, and have the committee members go out there. And then we would start looking at recommendations and then eventually come to sometime early next spring a final recommendation that we would bring to the authority for your consideration. And if in fact you're supportive of that, then we would begin the public education that Kate talked about on exactly how we would go about implementing the recycling program, if that's what we come to, and if you should choose to support it. And of course, the procurement is always important, whether it's additional bags. And I have talked to the people at what they call the MRF, American Waste, that there are bags that you can purchase that would not interfere with the sorting of the recyclables. And so there's some options out there for that in that regard, which wouldn't require folks to change a habit except for putting whatever recyclables we recommend in those bags. And then we would look to try to implement something sometime towards the fall or towards the end of 2017. That's maybe a little bit of aggressive because I'm not going to push the committee to come to any kind of conclusion. We would work through the timetables, keep the council up to date. But I do think our community is ready for implementing a curbside collection for recycling. And I think the best way to get started is have some citizens and staff work together on behalf of the council and come back to you next spring.
I think you're right. I'm thinking of names that I can suggest to people who've already expressed an interest in this situation. So,
Well, I have a couple of people in mind. I know there's some folks here that would like to speak tonight, and to me, we have this is a topic. I'm just put it out there. A few years ago, it was very controversial, and I think there's going to be some people that are concerned about this, making sure that we're not going down any slippery slope. There's no hidden agenda here. This is recycling only.
Well, I think a key issue that you mentioned exactly, we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're looking at implementing something that dovetails with the system we have so that we're not basically, you have to retrain me on everything I do. So this, what I like about this is the concept that I don't have to be retrained. Well, my wife may argue with that, but the concept that this allows the citizens to continue to enjoy what they have, but it allows us to add more services and to basically, benefit. I think that's the key of your comments. We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Absolutely.
We're looking at integrating something that most of our citizens want into a system.
Absolutely.
You're suggesting though, but after this ad hoc committee comes together, then having meetings of the community to bring this to the community.
Sure, I think that, once, I haven't really put much design to it in terms of how we would go about it, and I don't want to dictate what the committee could do, because all I'm going to be there is to help facilitate and guide and give my input. But I think the citizens need to help drive this with the direction and understanding that the council would like to see the Authority Council would like to see the implementation of a recycling program. That would be the guidance, and to keep it within the framework of how we currently collect our solid waste. Specifically the recyclables, and those would probably be the two parameters that they would be given, and then we would go forward accordingly. And pretty much from there, if they choose to have public meetings as a part of their deliberations, and then have additional meeting or two after we come up with a recommendation, that would certainly something we can design it any way we want.
Well, I will reiterate that certainly was my priority was in recycling, and again, I was pleased with that. I have to, again, agree with our trash service. It makes it very difficult to change when they do such an excellent job. Whether you use carts or not, at least right now, I think it is, you're free to use it if you want to. Bill Cade and his group of workers have done an excellent job. I've used a large cart, for over 20 years. Not once have they ever complained. They reach over inside that cart and they pull the bags out. I still put it in bags. My yard is probably, at least of all the councilmen, is one of the most difficult to get up and down, and my cart really works out great. So the recycling is the main thing. I think the cart is something that we can look at in the future. Bill and his group has done a great job of those. I was counting them as I went out of my subdivision on Monday, and half the people in our subdivision have carts out, now. So we're able to keep the dogs and stuff out of them, and work great with the Bill and his staff, because they just pull the bags out of the cart. We take the carts back up. But again, I'm excited about the possibility of the recycling. And I've made this comment before. We have our youth council. I think it's one of the ways that we really teach our youth, and we do it by demonstrating by recycling. You can't just go out and say, well, when you guys get older, you'll need to recycle, but we need to be doing it, and I think we're getting ready to do that, so I appreciate that.
It was actually my granddaughter that taught me how to recycle.
Great.
So you can be retrained, right?
I can be.
You don't have to, he's not too old, is that right, Dan?
We have a couple people signed up to speak. We have Edward Klingerman.
I'm glad you guys aren't too old to be retrained. My wife agrees with that. I've heard some good things. I signed up as opposed to recycling, but not really opposed to recycling. I don't like the curbside pickup. I think there are other options out there to look at to where it can be done and be done as effectively. They need to be looked at. And as far as surveys, I've worked with surveys for many, many years with the Gallup poll group. And I know however you phrase that question gets you the answer you want. So that happens at different times, but people still, it works out. You can look at things. The one thing that concerns me is the cost. What are we looking at in cost as we go forward? I'm glad to hear what I'm hearing tonight. We're looking at costs greatly as we go ahead. The one thing I don't want to see is the group of people in our city, and you guys do a wonderful job of managing a city and causing it to be one of the premier cities in the United States. So thank you for that. But we do have people that even a $10 raise in the cost of what they're doing affects their lives. They can't even afford backpacks for their kids that are going to school tomorrow, or lunches for them to eat. They have to be signed up on a program. So any change in cost is going to affect them greatly. So therefore, we need to see what we're doing there. You know, I understand that you have a stream of money that comes in that you tap for your budget to do this and that with. Is recycling something that's going to cost us money? Are we going to be able to get back money as we recycle to put into the system? I do love our trash bags and do understand, after hearing you tonight, that we're staying with the trash service we have. I appreciate that because it's a good system. You know, but I would like you to look at one different thing as time goes along, and that's setting up. We've got a lot of land that we own where recycling containers could be put out there for people that are in places to drop stuff off, you know, and it could be picked up there. So I don't know. I like the idea of the committee coming forward and where we're going. I do want to see you keep an eye on costs and on how it affects the people of the city, but at the same time, I have enjoyed hearing a lot that I heard tonight. All right? Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Billy Hickman.
My name is Billy Hickman. I reside at 5716 South Birch Avenue here in Broken Arrow. To begin with, I want to state that I'm not opposed to recycling. However, I don't want us to just recycle just because it's the trendy thing to do. I think we need to take a serious look at what kind of recycling we're wanting to do, what are the costs of that recycling, and how is it to be implemented. Now, first of all, I want you guys and gals to know that I'm not personally opposed to any of you as individuals, and I do appreciate this meeting this evening. But 3 years ago, Broken Arrow considered making some major changes in the way that we picked up our refuse and our garbage and all of our other unusables, and the city council and the people spoke loud and clear. We had 5 town hall meetings. In every one of those, it was overwhelmingly opposed to the changes that had been proposed and were about to be implemented. The city council, however, heard our voice, and it was stated that we will not change our trash pickup system against the people's will. I'm not going to trust a simple random survey on the telephone as being the people's will. It will reveal itself as time goes on as to whether or not the people really want this or whether the people do not want it. The city council has promised that they would follow the will of the people, and now here we are again discussing it. And I appreciate the new city manager's efforts. You don't know the history, you haven't been here and lived through it. I have. And so there are several things we need to consider. And I recognize we're not going to stop the trash bags, we're not going to change the service, but you do have that as an ultimate goal. Those in the beginning, you have 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, but once all of the goals have been accomplished, these are the things that we're giving up in order to recycle. We're giving up money. We've already stated in the survey that some citizens, many of the citizens, are not afraid to increase their payment of up to $10 per month per household in order to implement this system. Number 2, it will eliminate, as you have stated, are not free bags, but they are at least something that we get back for the tax dollars that we spend. That will be eliminated, and then we will still be required to use bags to put in the quote-unquote carts that are going to be coming down the pike. We all know that's the direction that we're moving if we implement this. And so we'll be told to use the carts, and we'll be told to move them out to the curb every day and to move them back at the end of the day. That will work a hardship on many people. And in my household, it'll be a real problem just finding a place to store the carts. Also, there will be a reduction from the twice-a-week pickup of garbage and trash to one day. Forcing every household to sort trash and garbage, put them into separate carts for pickup, requiring that every household separate so-called recyclable materials, put them in separate containers, and then we all know that you're going to have a policing policy, because there will be some who will not abide by the rules and the regulations, so you're going to have a way to enforce that. And so you'll first of all start off with warnings, then you will come along with a fine, and then you will put them in jail. Those are some of the things. So all of these changes, I'm not sure of, are in the best interest of Broken Arrow. Thank you for hearing me.
Okay, Wes, do you want to speak?
When I was a kid, Saturday mornings a couple times a month, I had to go out and do something with my dad I hated, and that was change oil in the car. And we'd jack the cars up and change it. I've still got scars on my knuckles when that oil wrench would come off and pop off. My favorite part was when I dropped the nut down into the hot oil and had to go fish it out. But when we finished, my job was to haul that oil pan, that metal oil pan, out in the ditch behind the house and dump it out. I bet I'm not the only person in this room who's ever dumped out an oil on the ground. But a few years later, Keep America Beautiful ran an ad with a Native American looking at pollution, and a tear ran down his cheek. Raise your hand if you remember that ad. Okay? I asked my dad after that why we were polluting. Well, I never thought about it. That's what I did when I grew up. We know better than that now. Today, we dig big holes in the ground, and we put plastic liners in the bottom of them, and we fill them up with trash, and we cover it up and forget about it. We know better than that now. You all know better than that now. And I've had personal conversations with all of you. You know we have to do this. We have to do this for our kids and our community. In 1992, I bought my first house in a state by what most people here would think would be backwards compared to Oklahoma. But that little town did curbside recycling in containers. My point is, part of your job as leaders is to lead our community. Half of our population in Broken Arrow is under 34 years of age. And they understand the importance of our environment. Our grandkids know it. Our kids know it. Sometimes leading is tough. So I'm saying we know the obvious answer to this. We know that the vast majority of our citizens are either in favor of it or don't really care. Too often government listens to a very small but vocal minority. But you all know better with that. I applaud the city manager in his approach to try to maintain the status quo, but yet move us in a slightly different direction to make curbside recycling easier. By curbside, we recycle more, we send less to the dump to pollute, to stay there for hundreds of years. Now, on a more professional note, we have a negative perception. Oklahoma has a negative perception. Part of my job is to recruit jobs to Broken Arrow. When we do that, many times today, and the consultant mentioned this, we are asked to describe our community's sustainability program or green program. We kind of have close to a goose egg. And so it's becoming more important to us as we try to grow our community in a responsible way. So I do encourage you to try to move in the direction the city manager has suggested. I think it's reasonable. I think it keeps people happy in a lot of ways, but yet gives those who want the opportunity to expand their recycling options that opportunity and do it in the right way. So thank you. I appreciate your leadership, and I know you'll do the right thing.
Thank you.
Mayor, members of the authority, can I just make one
Yes.
comment, please? There's a lot of folks here tonight, especially the press, and I want to make sure that I address this comment. Any recommendation that comes with regard to recycling is going to be voluntary. I've been recycling in different communities for 30 years, and it will not be mandatory. So there's now, if someone's got debris everywhere, that's a different story, but this is going to be a voluntary type program. Okay? I want to make that very, very clear. Thank you.
Have any more discussion or questions? I think we're going to need a motion to accept the survey.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Udi,
Yes.
Parks,
Yes.
Lester,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Thurman.
Yes.